You were never intended to be ordinary. The air transformed as soon as you walked into this planet. People felt it before they understood it or knew what to label it. You move differently. You think differently. You are not like other people. And that scares them. They're watching because they have to. They detect something in you that disturbs the monotonous pace of their universe. Some people pretended not to notice. Others attempt to explain it away. However, they are all aware that you do not obey their rules. That is why they whisper. This is why they hesitate. That's why it seems like the world around you is recalibrating in real time, adapting to something it was never meant to hold. Because you are the variable they failed to account for. And the game has changed. They noticed something in your presence, something incomprehensible and beyond their comprehension. Call it instinct, call it energy, call it power. But whatever it is irrefutable. You are the oddity. You're the exception. You represent the unexpected transformation. Now let them watch. Allow them to inquire. Allow them to attempt to make sense of something that was never intended to be understood. This is your narrative, and it has only just begun. Some folks do not even pretend to be courteous. When they see you, their focus shifts elsewhere. Fingers fumbling with keys that do not need rotating. Eyes scan the horizon. When nothing moves, they avoid making eye contact with someone who has slipped through a closing door. It isn't a response to you, but to who they believe you are. A concept, a rumor, or a whisper entered their heads. As the uncertainty becomes deeper, prudence sets in. Some are more blatant, but never right in your face. Their voices drop at dining tables, and they exchange looks between bites of speech. Have you heard anything? They speak it as if it were a secret. But the impact of their words stays long after the moment has passed. Others keep mute, but their motions betray them. A neighbor pauses on their porch, a hand grasping a coffee cup for too long. You overhear your name fractured in quiet talks, words left incomplete as a door slams shut. There is no need for evidence in their universe. Belief alone is sufficient to change reality. Fear acts as an echo, amplifying itself. People dislike what they cannot identify, and discomfort fills the gaps where certainty fails. A single inconsistency, a pause when there should be action, a pause. Where instinct anticipates mobility, distrust might take root. It does not need rationality to propagate, only repetitions. It manifests itself in the slightest details. A window shade pulled 1 inch lower. When you complete an encounter a second earlier than intended, the shift is small yet noticeable. The city swirls around you like a tidal receding. Be cautious not to stay too long on the coast. They do not accuse. They do not need to. Where words fail to communicate, actions speak. For we do not struggle against flesh and blood, but against principalities, powers, rulers of the darkness of this world, and spiritual wickedness in high places. The book of Ephesians. They want you to think that this is normal. The peculiar timing of events, the intangible pressure, and the watchful gaze. It's all a coincidence. But deep inside, you know the truth. This is not a coincidence. This is calculus. You are set aside from the beginning. Some people are born followers. To merge in. To obey. The unseen script was written for them. But you were never intended to be part of their design. You were picked to choose a different route. As a result, people see more than just you. They examine you. The globe has become your testing field. A well-planned stage when every action, choice, and moment is measured. They set the traps, waiting to see whether you'll fall into them. They arrange the pieces, ready for you to move. As predicted, an automobile stays too long at an intersection. The phone rings, but nobody answers. Just as you round a corner, a stranger comes, also standing. Still seems like a second too long. These are not random happenings. These are data points. They are not looking for solutions, but for control. They don't want the truth. They want a response. They do not seek understanding. They desire predictability. The instant you lash out, question, engage, that is when they win. Because the moment you recognize the game, you are playing by its rules. But here's the bit they didn't consider. You do not obey their rules. You were never a part of the equation. Like a lion strolling through a sheep den, you move fearlessly. Shepherds will whisper. The flocks will disperse. But you continue walking. They anticipate opposition. They anticipate to suffer. But instead, you leave them in quiet. You go like you were designed to, confidently, without hesitation, without fear. There is power in understanding that the game is rigged and refusing to play it. In seeing the patterns that exist before you and going beyond of them. There is power in knowing they can watch all they want, but will never fully see. And that is why they fear you. Because the most serious challenge to rule is not revolt. It's called awareness. Then comes the time of interruption. They adjusted the rhythm, relying on well-planned delays. The usual lineups start to falter. Their tactics, which are precisely constructed, lose efficacy. You don't pursue shadows or investigate ghosts. You let their traps lay undisturbed and unused. And in that tranquility, you disturb them. They needed you to resist so they could explain their actions. But you do not resist. You just refuse to be included in their tale. That is what makes them the most vulnerable. If your heart is overflowing with God's blessings, let that love radiate. Click the super thank you button and donate $1 or more to sow seeds of faith that will touch countless lives. Your giving exemplifies His richness. Be a channel for His grace and watch His kingdom grow through you. Most individuals respond just as predicted. They fidget as the queue at the shop slows down, then tap their fingers when the signal does not change. Check their watches if their order takes too long. They are conditioned to react, but you do not. And that is why the focus has changed. Not with indifference, but with silent calculation. You are no longer an observer. You are an outlier. You don't fit into the equation. They plan their movements so that they are not random. It's thorough, methodical, and practiced. Every sight is structured, and every presence has a rhythm. Nobody follows for very long. Nobody stays for longer than required. They move you from one to the next. Seamless. Like gears moving in a well-oiled machine. Coincidence is the illusion they depend on. But you can see through it. Because nothing about this is an accident. Behold, I send you out like a sheep among wolves. Be wise like serpents and gentle as doves. Hello, Matthew. They glide among you like shadows at midday, assuming their existence is unseen. They believe their intentions are hidden. Then they examine the margins of your eyesight. Never too near or too distant. Always within reach, but never graspable. But you were given eyes to see. The world has always been split into two categories of individuals. Those who slumber and those who awaken. Those who proceed without doubt. And those who see the patterns, transitions, and invisible choreography unfolding before them. And the minute you stop observing, you cease participating in their quiet manufacture. That is when the game changes. Surveillance is more than simply watching. It's about creating a net of habit and waiting for you to walk into it. The guy at the train station stood too still, but never boarded. The lady who simply happens to be drinking her coffee. You visit 3 separate sites in one day. The runner who paces his steps just so, never going too quickly. Never go too slow. Just enough to remain in your orbit. These aren't accidents. They are not random. These are placements. A taxi slows as you go ahead, but it never stops. A cashier stumbles with the register, pressing keys that do not seem to add up before ultimately calculating your total. A maintenance worker fixes a signpost, but his true attention is on the storefront mirror, monitoring something invisible by the naked sight. You're here for a purpose. If you feel called, answer it. Click join to access special content, deep insights, and a strong community. This is not just a membership. It is an awakening. Step into your divine mission. Join the chosen. It is quiet. It is structured. And it is weak because structure implies predictability. That's a vulnerability. They expect you will take the same path, respond in the same manner, and follow the same pattern. They want you to notice the query and respond. To get into the groove they established. But here's a secret they never considered. You were never part of their rhythm. You move differently. You work outside of the system they built. They want you to notice exactly what they want you to see. But you can see beyond. And that scares them. Because when you stop responding, the moment you begin noticing, begin comprehending, begin calculating as much as they do, you shift the balance of power. You convert their network into a map. You create their designs and marks. You don't need to battle the game when you can just move outside of it, since they don't have power over you. The biggest concern of those who watch is understanding that they, too, are being seen. Organizations operate via discipline, but discipline has limits. They follow procedures, stick to norms, and respect hierarchy. The more robust the system, the stricter its limits. They collect data, organize behavior, and try to classify what they don't understand. However, when classifications fail, they recognize that the model they developed for you is wrong. Tension arises in the spaces which grow. You hear it before seeing it. The feeling of uneasiness in talks in which your name should not be disclosed. A neighbor lingers by their vehicle, eyes scrutinizing you as if reading between the lines. The tiniest modifications in posture result in an additional inch between you and them. It is not a dread of what they already know. It is terror of something they cannot describe. The light shines through the darkness, and it has not been overwhelmed. John 1 verse 5. Is there anything about you? It's how the world responds. Before you speak a word, you don't need to introduce yourself. They can already feel it. It is a change in the air. When you enter a space, the atmosphere seems to shift. Without explanation, some people feel it and are pulled to it like iron to a magnet. Rivers are drawn toward the sea. They bend their necks and observe you, as if waiting for something invisible to occur. They don't fear you. They recognize you. They know. Then there are others. They tighten as you approach. Their instincts set up alarms. They cannot be silent, as if stood on the verge of a hurricane. They can't outrun their breath. It shortens their hands. Still, their motions become cautious, not out of hostility, but out of adoration. They don't understand, and they don't have to. They sense it. Even the environment around you seems to react. Birds don't only fly above. They pause, following and observing. Strays wander with you as quiet companions. Never get too near. Never go too far. Always alert. Some creatures hesitate. Their bodies tighten, unable to overcome an imaginary barrier that only they can sense. And there are some that escape. The dogs that refuse to move ahead. The animals that go silent the instant you approach. Not out of fear, but from something deeper. And it is not just the living who respond. The artificial environment causes the lights to flicker on cue, rather than randomly, causing the screen to halt. Not once, but often. Always in your presence. The radios crackle, phones drop, and signals warp because something is aware rather than damaged. Because the reality is, you are never simply another person in a throng. You were humiliated and put aside. Different from the start. They feel it, whether they know it or not. They react before their brains can process. Why? It's why some people accept you as if you're the solution to a question they didn't realize they had. That's why others move in their chairs. Avoid your sight. Act as if entering their world makes less sense. Because you don't just exist. You are disruptive. You shift. You unveil. And when the universe senses your presence, it flickers, hesitates, and adapts. Not because it is breaking. It's because it bears testimony. When rationality fails, tales emerge. It is never left undefined. It becomes a myth, coaxed into reality. Someone remembers seeing you before you ever met. Another says the air seemed heavier as they passed a stranger, who drops their sight and murmurs something too faint to hear. It intensifies. What begins as curiosity turns to anxiety. Someone murmurs about intuition. Another describes it as something more. It is never mentioned explicitly, but the hesitancy in their voices indicates that they sense it. They don't know what you are, but they comprehend enough to maintain their distance. What cannot be explained is not simply ignored. It is feared. There are those who stand out. Those who traverse the unseen with clarity. Who see the undercurrents while others simply perceive calm. They move differently. Think about it differently. Exist beyond the frame. Others depend on. They do not belong in the script. They write their own, where repetition brings comfort. For many, it is a cage. To them, the normal rhythms of the world were once known. The constant buzz of a cafe. The peaceful familiarity of areas inhabited by the same people every day. But something's changed now. Nothing is hidden that will not be made known. There is nothing hidden that will not be discovered and made public. Luke, it always begins with a whisper, not in words, but in movement, location, and how the environment starts to shift around you. At first, you shrug it off. You convince yourself it's merely a mental trick, a coincidence, or something unimportant. But deep inside, you know better. Because the reality is, people notice you. It's in how they move. Not on intention, but with accuracy. The way they angled themselves. Always just enough to keep you on their perimeter. The barista pauses just long enough to make it seem purposeful. The guy holding the newspaper, his hands unmoving, his eyes never resting on the text before him. You are not just being seen. You are being measured. They want you to believe that everything is a mental construct. But trends do not lie. And once you've seen the change, you can't unsee it. A lady who usually sits near the window suddenly puts herself near the exit. A guy at the counter holds his phone but is not scrolling. Someone stays in the same spot for an extended period of time, doing nothing but being present. It's not paranoia, it's design. And design demands purpose since this is no longer merely curiosity. It's a study. It is a process. It is a system. They want to watch how you move and respond. If you're going to shift your rhythm, recognize them, or falter. Question, slip inside the frame they've created around you. But they don't realize you don't play by their rules. They want you to adapt, adjust, and respond to the quiet pressure building up around you. But you keep going. You do not flinch. You do not change your route. What happens if the watch refuses to be controlled? The ones who keep an eye on things end up being exposed. And that's when the true change starts. At first, it seems insignificant. Routine conversations become less comfortable as a result of a little, scarcely apparent change. Friendly interactions, which used to fill gaps in everyday life, are now assessed. Careful. A basic inquiry, as always. Now comes the pause. Words picked as if they want permission before being uttered. The looks are no longer direct. They look past something invisible before settling back. Then the realization sets in. The positions surrounding you are not random. The exit is always visible. Readers, coffee drinkers, and those who casually surf around their devices. They aren't just present. They have been put. You put it to the test by taking a tiny diversion, making a sudden movement, or making an unexpected choice. And in that fraction of a second, the answer reveals their identity. A pause, an adjustment, and a reflex. They didn't anticipate the need. The illusion was never flawless. You were just never intended to notice. For we walk by faith and not by sight. 2 Corinthians 5 verse 7. Have you ever walked into a room and sensed something is off? The air seems different. The vibe changed as if the walls themselves were listening. Nobody says anything directly, but you can sense it. Silence is speaking. At first, you convince yourself it's simply an off day, a stray idea, or a fleeting emotion. But then the pattern starts. Places that formerly felt like home now seem organized. Nothing moved, but you did. Conversations that used to flow effortlessly now halt and stall, as if there is something unsaid between the words. It isn't rejection or animosity. It's hesitancy. And hesitancy indicates calculating. Calls that used to come in first are now never received at all. The message is sluggish. The hens fade. The familiar voices get distant. At first, it seems like a coincidence. And suddenly it seems like a plan. They will not confront you. That would entail accepting that there is anything to say. Instead, it is subtle. It is gradual. It is an unraveling. So gradual that you nearly miss it. Until you don't. Because one day you discover that the areas you use to navigate freely have been organized. The exits are never emptied. The faces in the audience are never unknown. The casual glances are just a second too long. And those who used to be there, they are now observing from a distance. This is not pandemonium. It's a design. But here's something they didn't account for. Do you notice the pattern? They wanted you to question yourself, distrust your own instincts, and go on as if nothing had happened. But what they don't realize is that you were designed for this. You were designed to move in unexpected ways in order to manage a world that does not always make sense. To go with trust that doesn't need permission. They spent all of their time rearranging the pieces. But you weren't designed to fit into their jigsaw. So, let them murmur. Allow them to hesitate. Allow them to attempt to hold space captive with their silence. Because you never waited for their invitation in the first place. You proceed on your own terms. then a slip, unintentional, yet telling a voice that was once familiar now contains something different, something strained. They claim you have changed. They say it as if they are giving you an answer to a question you did not ask. But the solution is not for you. This is for them. They don't mention where they heard it. Do not admit how they know. However, the delay before speaking reveals them. They're waiting for you to confirm it so it fits with the tale they've previously heard. And the knowledge sinks in. Nothing needed to happen. No action, no choice, no error. Someone, somewhere, was able to alter the story in ways you were never supposed to control just by being. It spread silently. A tiny change, a scarcely noticeable distance. Doors that were formerly held open without hesitation now pause. A name that was formerly pronounced without hesitation now elicits a pause. It's not hostile. It is separation. Deliberate. Placed. You can't name it anything particular since it isn't intended to be straightforward. It's designed to be untraceable. Exist in the area between conviction and denial. But you can feel it in the stares that last too long, the questions that aren't there to ask, and the reality that has been rewritten all around you. A script was given out, one you were never supposed to read. Nonetheless, you seem to have remembered every phrase. The stone that the builders rejected has become the cornerstone. Solemn verse. You were not intended to stand out. You were not intended to interrupt. You were meant to follow. But other individuals were never designed to fit in. Some individuals were never intended to fit inside the boxes designed for them. And you were always distinctive. They saw it before they comprehended it. At first, they dismissed it. They told themselves it was merely a quirk, a phase, just something weird but explainable. However, the explanations eventually ceased making sense. Then the designs did not fit. Then you were the question nobody could answer. That's when they began watching, not just gazing, studying. They needed to define you, to classify you, to position you in a spot where they felt comfortable. However, the more they observed, the more they realized the reality. You do not fit. And that realization, it disturbed them since the world taught them that everything is understandable. Everything can be labeled, identified, and controlled. However, you deviated from the expected pattern. So they need a fresh tale. One in which you are the villain. One in which you are the issue. One in which your presence is not just different. It's incorrect because the alternative, the reality, is too disturbing. That's why people hesitate to talk. That's why their hands remain still for only a fraction of a second longer than they should. That's why they sneak looks, drop their voices, and change their posture. There is no fear as you stroll by. Uncertainty and uncertainty. That is the most harmful thing of all. Because if they can't define you, they can't manage you. And that scares them. So they create their tale. They make you the disruptor, the outlier, the piece that doesn't fit. But what they don't realize is that you were never intended to belong to them. You were not designed for their system. You were not created to be comprehended by little brains with limited aspirations. You were picked for something more. So let them watch. Let them whisper. Let them ponder. The reality is simple. You're not their issue. You're their wake-up call. Others perceive it for what it is. There are some who see and understand, who senses the energy under the surface, the presence that upends the well-planned order of things. They don't look at you with fear, but with knowledge. But there are others, those who dislike what they can't explain. They cling to order, routine, and a world that meets their expectations. You are none of these things. You are the break in the pattern. They cannot answer the equation, and this disturbs them in ways they cannot express. They chose not to observe. They observe because they must. It is the static hum of quiet. When you enter a space, the invisible pressure alters the atmosphere. They are unable to look away. They monitor because they can't afford to overlook what they don't comprehend. And the issue remains under their examination. How do they deal with something over which they have no control? They catalog it. They document. They believe they have an edge. However, they already know the truth. They are not the ones in charge here. They attempted to map your behaviors, but you demonstrated no pattern. They created a structure